Hey Hugo, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good this morning. The rain has abated. The sun is shining strongly, and I've got my eye on a evening session in the sea with my son Darwin
Nice.
and some friends. Um, so yeah, um, it's good, and work is going well. So that's good.
And
Good
yeah,
day.
you were just showing me the setup of your office. You're
Yeah, it's like
pretty close to the light-out, right?
it's rad. I mean, I, I I had an amazing office at Surfers Against Sewage, up at Wheel Kitty, next door to my good friend Tom Kay at Finisterre, above the beautiful Trevornance Cove. Amazing walks around from the office. And when I took the job to lead Oceana here in the UK, one of the things I wanted to make sure we did was have a good ocean proximity,
Yeah.
and be even closer to a wave I liked than Surfers Against Sewage, and I've definitely achieved that. So it's really good. For any ocean charity, I think it's vitally important, to be close to the environment and the community that you're fighting to protect. I see it as like a day-to-day part of our culture, our values, our mission, our identity, and it's something that people respond to. Being marooned on the sort of the fringes of Hoxton or Islington in an office would not be commensurate with the mission that we have as a charity. So I always wanted to be by the sea, and use our influence in Westminster and other sort of seats of power, as and when we need to be there. So it's worked successfully at SAS, and now it's working well at Oceana too.
Nice. It definitely works better that way around. I remember when I was living in London and I was working for Factory Media at the time, and they were doing Surface Path and Surf Europe, and every weekend I'd kind of trying to get out, and it's like a 5-hour drive or whatever it was to get down to Newquay or to Devon and stuff. And
look, and in this day and age too, we've come through this big shock of the pandemic. I'm not actually sure any of us have had time to process it properly and really understand its impacts on us. I mean, some people probably think that they have, and I do at times, but just so much change that's happened, and people don't need to be so sort of city-based or place-based in terms of offices. And many offices have got a much more flexible working approach, not just in terms of the days they attend, but where their teams are. Their teams tend to be where they want to live and where it gives them the biggest sense of fulfillment from their sort of their personal lives and their values. And I always believe that if people have got that, then they're going to be the best as part of your team anyway, because life is about the right balance. And if people are, getting what they want from the ocean or from the environment that they want, then they're going to be great as part of your team. I know what a difference a swim in the sea or a surf makes, or a run across the coastal path in the morning. You change your chemistry by doing that, and you're going to turn up being the best you at work every single time.
Yeah. Well, it just makes everyone happier, right?
Yeah,
exactly. People are sort of fighting these things of like of kind of blocking it out, and then okay, we'll just do it whenever we can. But if it's integrated into your life, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that, then that's great.
And the problem is that ebbs away. People often think that. I suppose with what you described to me before with Factory and great magazines, great sort of vision around them, but that thing of driving 5 hours down to Croyd or Woolacombe or Fistral on the weekend. It's very easy on a Friday evening when you're knackered from a week at work and deadlines to go, I can't do the drive. And I'll just miss it this time. And then you go, I'll just miss it the next time. And then you end up just missing it. And then you're like, not doing it ever.
Yeah. And I mean, when we, I guess last met, it was over in Lisbon for the UN Ocean Summit. So that was in 2022. Quite a lot has happened since then. You've been pretty busy with everything, and I mean, that was That was kind of before Oceana, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, well, it was actually, I met some of the Oceana team out there, and it was good. And they were approaching me sort of aggressively is the wrong word. In a really powerful way to attract me to the job. And it was great. I met some of the team, the fantastic European team, and people from the States. So yeah, it was quite a big moment from that sort of change. And it was a big decision for me, of course, to move on from SAS and to take on this new role and go back to sort of start. I'm part of a big global organization, but I'm starting a new team here and developing new campaigns. And so it was, going back to some of that stuff, which has been brilliant. It's such a privilege to have another opportunity to work on the issues I love with a brilliant global organization, and to be able to start a new team between Cornwall and all of the places that they're going to be, London and other parts of the country. So yeah, it was a big moment, Lisbon. I enjoyed that conference. Worked closely there with Chad Nelson, a good friend who runs Surf Rider, who I know you know, and I think he's featured on the show.
He is, yeah. He's been on the show. Yeah.
And so, all of that, it's good, and I do like those moments. Not everyone believes in those big moments, but I see the whole of the sort of the environmental sort of movement as different tools in a toolkit. And, you've got grassroots activism, you've got the protests, you've got big moments when the world comes together and is looking at the issues. You've got the detailed policy work within Westminster and other seats of power. So there's all of these different things that interface, and I'm not a subscriber to one thing or the other. It's not just going to be one thing that wins it. At the moment, there's going to be a big need for the activism because some of the processes are failing and stalling, and we need to keep pushing with public pressure. But we still need the processes. Somebody still needs to make decisions. Policies still need to be written. We still need the legislators and the decision makers in the right places. So you've got to be trying to do all of it. You can't myopically think one thing will change it.
Yeah. And going back to, well, I guess when you kind of took over as a CEO for SAS, like what was there any kind of one particular focus in those early days then, sort of around like 2008 time, or what? Because there are so many issues, right? It's kind of, I know. Well, look,
it was a really challenging start, and it often is when you come into anything, because I mean, truthfully, and I've loved SAS since it started in 1990 and been a big fan, and I will always remain one of its biggest fans. I see it as a child in a way that I had to raise to a very, very important period that I've, enabled and empowered to go off and be independent in a great way. When I started it in 2008, it was in a difficult position. My predecessors had a challenging time, raising money and bringing the team together. I inherited a small team of 3 people, and a stuttering moment. I mean, there were potentially in 2008 it was going to be closed down. It was struggling, and so I came in with a change agenda to not just work on the water quality issue, but to bring in new campaigns and build on the ideas of my predecessors on plastic pollution, on climate, and other areas. And then really set about creating the resources and the capacity to do that. Because you can't just campaign with nothing. You've got to have people who are organisers. Of course, we were an organisation that created projects and campaigns that people could be involved with. So we had hundreds of thousands of volunteers in the end. But where I started was 3 people, a few hundred volunteers a year, and a very, very small budget. And actually an office and a sort of setup that was creaking at the seams. It was archaic at the times, and that was not to sort of attribute any sort of negative sentiments to my predecessors, but it's very difficult. You've got to create momentum to get the sort of money you need for proper investment, and it's not £1,000 here or there. You need proper, substantial sums of money to build an organization and put the infrastructure in place to campaign effectively, whether it's digital campaigning and the right websites and social media structures and investment, or whether it's people or other expertise externally. You really need an injection of capital to do that. And it took us time to do that. So one of the priorities for me was being able to articulate that and bring people on the journey, talking to the big funders. We got charitable status, which made a really big difference. It didn't stop us from campaigning effectively, but it did enable us to fundraise much more effectively. And I brought in brilliant people. I'm forever thankful for the fantastic people that I worked with. You know, I was just one part of it. I was a visible part of SAS for the 15 years or so that I ran it. But, you know, fundamentally, I was only as strong as my team was strong. And the best moments were bringing my best team together. And, you know, I'm so proud of what we did, and I'm so proud of what they're doing now. It's amazing. And that I feel is the biggest sense of achievement for me, that, you know, I've left it in a much, much, much stronger state than I think arguably it ever was. And that is partly my leadership and partly the fantastic people that we brought together in fundraising, in campaigning, in community building. So it was it will be forever one of the best periods of my career. And it was interesting because, you know, when I started, people weren't really paying much attention to us at all. You know, we didn't have all of the innovation and data and approaches that we brought in. So it's hard, you know, it's hard to get in the papers. It was hard to get public engaged with what we're doing. It was quite niche still. And I never dreamt that it would, you know, really, even in my wildest dreams, that it would take us not only, you know, to building a community of hundreds of thousands of people around the country, a brand that further built into one of the sort of biggest sort of NGOs in the EnviroServe space, not just in the UK, but in the world. And, you know, a sort of a test case, which others, you know, and a blueprint that others have looked at, from Protect Our Winters through to, you know, Save The Waves, who I'm involved with today. All of those things. And it took me to speaking in, you know, UN conferences, as we've talked about, took me to 10 Downing Street, took me to Buckingham Palace, took me to, around the world, took me to the President's house in the Maldives to talk about protecting waves. It took me all around the world to really propagate this sort of connection between, you know, strong conservation, people, and the sports and environments that we love. And that's the nexus for me. I love sport, I love the environment, and I love being around people, and I love empowering people. And so all of the things were ticked off, and I was able to really fulfill my sort of vision and dream with it to do that. And I will forever love Surfers Against Sewage and what I was able to do for it, what it was able to do for me, and the team that I've left in place to carry on the good fight, particularly at this time that, you know, the water companies have finally been exposed for the lies they've told since privatization. They hid their pollution out of sight, out of mind. They manipulated the facts to make it look like they had done a good job for all of those decades. And it was the information and the technology that we used to expose that information through the Safer Sea service and the real-time sewage alerts that blew the lid on it. They said, actually, you haven't done what you said you were going to do. You haven't really cleaned up your act. You've just hidden your pollution elsewhere. And we, as an organization, led the charge on that. When we first piloted real-time information in 2010, I think, you know, of course, no one really was paying attention, nor in 2011 or 2012. We started building all of that mapping, 2013, right through to now. And now that's, you know, headline news every day, and it's great. And SAS, alongside Fergal Sharkey and River Action and all those brilliant people are doing good things. And I haven't let go of it. So I'm taking the government to court in July, to the High Court, on their failure and on a very poor water quality plan that lets water companies off the hook until 2050. And so I've kept that as one of my key campaigning goals. It's a side hustle for me. It's not Oceana.
This is the Good Law project, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a side hustle. I've got a few side hustles. The Good Law project. I'm a board member for Save The Waves. I'm a columnist for Oceana Graphic magazine, and my day job is running Oceana here. I'm building a team on what I consider some of the really critical issues: offshore oil and gas, unsustainable fisheries, and habitat destruction. In our ocean.
And they all kind of, I mean, all those side hustles interlink, right? Everything's kind of connected with the ocean, and
it's all ocean based. Like, I will always be an ocean campaigner. And so, it's all that. That's what I write about. It's what I talk about. It's what I speak about. And I try and surround myself with people who want to do the same or believe in the same, or who are open to coming on a bigger journey to try and protect and restore our ocean. So always focused on that. And then I surf pretty badly as well, so try and get in as much as possible. I'm 60 surfs in this year. I've got a target of 150.
Oh, really? Already? That's amazing.
60 I've done. Hopefully it'll be 61 later. My son's a bodyboarder, a pretty good bodyboarder, and he gets me in the water on bodyboard sometimes, which is great.
Nice.
And we surf all sorts of different waves. So I surf lots of different craft too, which is good.
It keeps it interesting, right? Instead of if you just longboard, it's good to mix it up, I reckon.
Yeah, and I'm not a subscriber to this sort of the shortboard, like endless sort of there's a big judgment from shortboarders. I think there's different craft for different waves. There's waves I surf that no one ever shortboards, that are just for bodyboards. There's waves that I surf that are just for longboards and foamies. There's all sorts, and you can have all sorts of craft in your car or van, and you'll always end up getting stoked. If you fix to just one type of board, you'll end up getting skunked quite a lot too.
Yeah, this is true. And kind of looking back, when people weren't, like surfers have kind of always knew, like, not every surfer, but they've kind of been aware, obviously, when they're out in the water, they're paddling around pollution and stuff, and getting it out to like the general consensus and to the public, to the mainstream, getting press, getting coverage, all that kind of stuff in those early days, when I guess you guys would have been blocked quite a lot, and it just sort of, big money kind of would have just pushed it under the carpet. How did you kind of go around that, and then getting those numbers and getting the supporters and the volunteers on?
It's sort of in a way like people often tell like a romantic sort of like inspiring story when you look back on things, and you can sort of create this quite linear journey of like, it all happened like this, and it was all good, and we went from A to B, and I had this conversation. The truth is it doesn't happen like that. It's sort of ups and downs. You make gains and you make losses, and you review and you go again, and some things work and some things don't, and you keep evolving. And I think, just in anything with campaigning particularly, but with anything, just keeping on turning up. You turn up, you open the office, you get stuff done, you create a plan, you deliver the plan, you review the plan, you go again, you win, you lose, you draw, whatever, you go again, you keep going over years, months and months, years and years, and you make it work. And a lot of people don't want to keep getting up. They get knocked down once or twice and they go, I've sort of had it. But I think turning up and being present and giving it your full attention is a big part of any journey. And then at the end, you end up in your destination, and then people go, how did you get here? And you go, well, I just sort of turned up, got on it, and I was committed to the ride. But like money was important. Some of the early funder conversations that I had were really important. Building I used quite commercial terms at the beginning, and people might not have liked it entirely. But we had to build campaigns that were like products that we could sell to people, and products that then people wanted. So what could people be involved with? Citizen science, apps they could use, beach clean communities, our regional reps program. What could we both attract funding with, but what could we also involve people with and give back to the community? How could we empower people? How could we make SAS part of their lives and give it to them as something that they could do locally, regionally, and that was really important because people wanted that. We established fantastic groups of passionate people who we relied on as much as they relied on us for. But there's always a trade-off with that. They want a bit of the brand. They want to be empowered. They want the toolkits, and we could do that. And we needed the data they'd find, the information they'd get. We'd collate it, and then we could, as we've done with the Safer Sea Service, challenge government and industry with it. Same with our beach clean work and our brand audit. And so that's a specific sort of grassroots sort of model that we set up, and it was very effective. But we lost on some things along the way. There were moments that ideas didn't stick, where we didn't deliver the results that we had hoped to. And those challenges in the sort of rosy prism and sort of focus of the media often aren't. Of course, they're not covered because they're not good enough to sell papers, or they're not good enough to get people engaged, and people don't talk about that. So people don't see those things, and actually it's those things that you learn the most from: the applications that you failed at, the projects that didn't quite work, the data that didn't stick, the citizen science that was too convoluted, and so it's only sort of retrospectively you sort of see that. So you learn your most from your failures, not your successes necessarily. It's easy to have too much sort of hubris from your successes. You just think that like everything is good, and you don't really take the time to deconstruct what really worked and what might have made something better. So often with a success, you focus too much on that good thing that you achieved, but you might not go, well, how could it have been even better or even stronger or whatever. And whereas with failures, you'll always do that. You go like, what didn't work and why? But you won't do that with success. You just go, well, let's go and have a pint and let's celebrate that. So there's lots of things, and then they're just sort of pivotal points. I think for me, getting the funding up and running, some of those structures, building the team. We went from 4 of us to like 30 people when I left. Quite a significant charity in Cornwall, certainly. And there were moments. A really big moment was 2015 for us, where we needed to shift through the gears, and I wanted to connect more internationally. It was a year I did my TED talk. We organized and hosted the Global Wave Conference with people from, experts from around the world, the Save The Waves Collation, Surfrider. We had climate experts from around the world. We had people from universities, Exeter University, Plymouth University. We had, pro surfers, Greg Long, Tom Curran, Eski Britton, Ramon Navarro, Brad Gerlach, people who hadn't been in the UK for years, with some of those folk. We created a real buzz around, our power as conveners, and as people who wanted to push the envelope in terms of the issues we were working on. We hosted 2 amazing days in Cornwall, and then took everyone to Parliament for a big part of the event. And it was, I think, a moment that showed just how serious we were, not just activists and campaigners, but able to bring the best in the world together. And that was exciting for SAS and moved us forward. And some of the ways we started to really present ourselves with cutting edge sort of films and imagery also helped boost the campaigns, whilst never taking our eye off the ball of the grassroots activism, because that's where it fundamentally came from. People who have an intimate relationship with their beach, who surf at their beach, swim at their beach, they love their river, and that interaction between them and the blue space is what drives the action and that authenticity. And it's why I'm still by the sea here. It's why I believe organizations need that if they're working around environmental issues. I think it's much more powerful. And you don't want sort of a colonialism of those spaces that's like, well, we're never going to be in them, we're not going to be by them, we're not going to see them, we're just going to talk about them and campaign for them. It's like, well, How does that work if you're working on it, but you never even go to the beach, or never set foot in the sea, or never get salted? It doesn't work for me. And I think it's a fundamental part of me. Some people will disagree, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I think it's harder to take people seriously if they don't actually truly believe and are motivated by what they're campaigning for. It's like part of the 101. You got to, but it's part of your values system. It's like if you believe in protecting the sea, it's like, why? And it's because I surf in it and swim in it all the time, and I've got a lot of people who I know who do, and I know a lot of industries that rely on it, and I know a lot of bad people who are doing bad things to it. So let's try and reconcile those things.
Yeah. And how, like, now, sort of, like, I guess switching, like, I'm going over to Oceana when they approached you, was sort of, that was kind of like the middle of last year, right?
Yeah.
That kind of...
Yeah, sort of middle of last year, so yeah, sort of April, something like that, May, I can't remember. It came up, and I always knew, like, I've done SAS for close to 15 years, and taken it through, and I'd probably prefer your opinion on it, but I think I led quite an interesting evolution and period for the organization, and took it in quite a dramatic escalation in its sort of scale, impact, visibility, all of those things. And hopefully that will continue. And I think it's great that, you should always hope that whatever you move on from becomes even better than what you left. That's always the hope. And they approached me, and it was a hard decision. It was a really hard decision, but I knew that SAS it's not an end of career job. It's not a job I wanted to stay in, until I was 65. I just don't think it's that type of organization. I think any organization needs change, including at leadership team. There should always be succession. It shouldn't be a permanent, leadership. It shouldn't be a permanent board of directors. It shouldn't be a permanent CEO. It shouldn't be a permanent leadership team, because that just leads to either over empowerment of one or a few people, or it leads to stagnation, whatever. And I think it's important to have change. And particularly in Cornwall, there's a lot of organizations that have, because there's not much lateral movement here. People get a senior job, and they do stay in it forever, because they're like, I like living in Cornwall. I can't see anything else around me that I could move to.
So they just get set, right?
And so they get set, and then the organization gets set with them. Gets set with them. They're the person. And I was conscious that I wanted other things for me too. I was always interested since 2015 in that Global Wave Conference. I've been sort of running around doing things with people internationally. I'm part of the board at Save The Waves. I've been working with them a long time on their Vision Council for the World Surfing Reserves. But for me, I wanted that international experience. Oceana is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, ocean-focused campaigning and advocacy group. Offices and teams in sort of 14, 15 countries. Amazing reputation around sustainable fisheries, around marine protected areas, around stopping oil and gas. And they came to me, and we started to have a really good conversation about what that could look like for the UK and where I could learn. And you've always got to step into where you can learn even more. And I wanted to learn more from people around the world. We've got amazing teams in South America, in Europe, in lots of different countries. And I want to learn from other people, and in a new way, in the international context. And that's a really rare opportunity, particularly if you want to be still based in Cornwall. And this came up, and we came to a really good deal. And I'm working with some incredible people. We're already making forays into the campaign areas. We've published a big report around the threat of offshore oil and gas in the UK, and we're working with climate leaders on that. We've done some big exposés on bottom trawling in marine protected areas. We've got legal challenges with the government. And we've got lots more to come. My team's evolving, both here in Cornwall. I'm building a really great team of values-based campaigners. And and it's really good to be part of this international network. So I knew there was something beyond SAS. You know, I think if I'd stayed at SAS until I was 65, it would have probably raised questions. You know, I knew that there was change coming, and you never quite know when that is. So I hadn't planned it, but you have conversations, and then it happens, and then you keep moving. And you've got to put yourself, and I, you know, counsel anyone with this, is like, you know, you've got to put yourself in, you know, out of your comfort zone and back into a new place of learning. And it's once you're out of your comfort zone that you really start to learn even more. And now I'm learning so much about the new issues. I'm learning so much from my colleagues around the world, and I'm also bringing my own knowledge and experience of leading SAS very successfully into the organization, and that's a fantastic place to be. So yeah, it's exciting. A lot of hard work, but I always work hard, and at least I can get in the sea a lot too, being based so close to it.
And would you say there's a lot of similarities when you were heading up SAS at the beginning to then now running the UK for Oceana, and sort of but then with that international kind of backing as well, right? So you can kind of bounce ideas and things off.
It's the same and different. There's a lot of decisions to make. Any leader's role is like a juggling act. As I said before, you know, I think people often see me doing things like this, and they'll see me in the media, and they'll see me doing, you know, the sort of the shiny stuff, and they'll think that's
Hugo's just doing talks.
But my job is you know, spreadsheets and team meetings and decision making and solving problems and supporting a team and empowering the team to be the best they can be, and you know, being, you know, part leader, part, you know, counselor, part, you know, support, you know, all of those things. And so people just see the shiny stuff, but, you know, leadership is about so many different things simultaneously, and supporting the people around you. You can only be a good leader if you truly empower people to be the best that they can be. And that's what I'm committed to doing, and was committed to doing at SAS. And it's good. It's exciting. It's a lot of work, you know, starting something. You know, you've got to go back to it. But where sometimes people will frame that as frustrations, you know, you would have had it, you know, maybe in a magazine, you want it to have more circulation, or you want it to be this, or you want it to be that. I just see that as headroom of opportunity. I see like where we haven't got things yet, as that's where we can fill into and grow into. And if you're already in those spaces, then you're sort of in that sort of comfort space. So for us, like all of the things we're not quite there with yet, it's like great, because that's the exciting work. That's what we're doing. Yeah.
And it sort of gives you a roadmap, right? And
so it's sort of cool. And I've got some great people who were previously at Greenpeace, at the Environmental Justice Foundation, at World Animal Protection, people who really live and breathe campaigning, and who live and breathe the ocean, who love the ocean, who want to swim, surf, use it how they want. You know, that's what I believe in. And that, you know, a motivated, happy team is also like a productive team. So, you know, that's you know, part of our culture coming out of the pandemic. You know, people just being, you know, you can work too much. You know, I often look at it, you know, for me, I think I've used the words before, sort of changing your chemistry is really important. And I'll give you an example. You know, Monday, I you know, have had quite a lot on my plate, or Tuesday actually, because we're in a bank holiday week. I had quite a lot on my plate, and I was feeling a bit stressed about those things, and they felt like external stresses that were problematic. I went for a run. I ran from my office here at Town Beach along down to Porth Beach, along the beach and back. It's, you know, not far, like 6 or 7K. And I came back, and I'd resolved all of them just by releasing the endorphins in my body, and the chemistry being changed. And actually, there were no problems. Everything was good. We had the solution to everything, and the day was an excellent day. And I think, you know, that's why I want to be near the sea. That's why I encourage people to be outside and use the ocean, because you know, most of your problems can be sort of addressed by changing your own chemistry, and most of them just exist in that chemical imbalance inside you.
Yeah, and it's just built up in your own head, I guess, right? And then you get overwhelmed, and then it just kind of gets more
all of that. Yeah. So yeah, you know, all good. I can't remember why I digressed into that, but hopefully that was a useful thing for people listening.
It is definitely, and like with so many issues to kind of combat. I mean, like looking at everything from like plastic pollution through to like we were saying, trawling, oil. I mean, how do you guys like? Is like how do would or like is with the organization? Is there sort of focus, or is it kind of split into like pillars, so to speak, or?
Yeah, well, look, most of the countries operate on specific campaigns that have sort of time-defined sort of goals over a period of sort of 3 to 5 years, and that they're decided really at board level, and then funded. You know, we work with some of the biggest sort of environmental funders in the world, which is great to see those people around our boardroom table and in our network. It's a real privilege to work with them. And we decide, they help the organization decide and confirm the direction of travel. And then we're committed on them. And we're committed in 3 areas in the UK. And I these were sort of predetermined, but the activities aren't. So we're working on stopping offshore oil and gas, or new offshore oil and gas in the UK, and the just transition to cleaner, greener energy, particularly offshore wind. And so we're committed to that up until 2028, and we've got a really important inflection point politically about policy making around that, which is the general election, which is not far away, end of next year. So it's a big campaigning moment, both in terms of manifestos being written and then that election sort of process of speaking to the public. We've got 2 other areas we're working on here. One is habitats, which is marine protected areas. And we've got about 38% of our seas around the UK designated in MPAs. And a lot of good work was done around those designations over the last decade or so. Fantastic campaigners calling for more of our seas to be put in MPAs. But the challenge is now implementation and the effective management of them, because they're great as lines on a map, but they're often described as paper parks in the UK and in other places around the world. They're not effectively managed. So we've got things like industrial bottom trawling happening in a lot of our offshore MPAs. Last year alone, there was about 130,000 hours of industrial fishing that took place in MPAs, almost 10,000 hours of bottom trawling, the most destructive type of fishing. From international standards, bottom trawling is incompatible with environmental protection of those areas. So they're completely incompatible with an area being designated as an MPA. We've got oil and gas installations and exploration taking place in and around MPAs with all of the threat that carries. We've got other activities happening in them. We've got pollution going into MPAs, both offshore and nearer shore, from plastic pollution through to sewage pollution. Now, on one hand, people are trying to restore some of these nearshore habitats, but on the other hand, we're pumping sewage pollution into them. So we're very focused on MPAs, but particularly on stopping industrial activities, fishing and offshore oil and gas. And then the third is sustainable fisheries, which is complicated. I'd look at it more as stopping unsustainable fishing in our ocean as a campaigner. We still overfish many of our fish populations in our waters, and that is unsustainable. And so we're working on making sure that also is brought closer to reality in terms of a long-term sustainable use of our ocean. And really it's about challenging those big industrial fishing interests, those factory boats and industrial trawlers, and then putting more pressure for the government and the system to prioritize and support low impact local fishing communities that are causing less damage or no damage at times, if you're looking at some techniques, to the wider environment. Of course, they're always taking biodiversity and life out of the sea. It's just,
and that would be like looking at like illegal kind of shipping as well, right? And like overseas kind of.
We've got an international team, and I've got a person working as part of this team on illegal and unregulated fishing, because there's a lot of illegal and unregulated fishing. We've got Oceana is leading a lot of campaigning and convening people around the world on that, and we've got one person in that team from a UK perspective, and it's a really big issue. I mean, the high seas and the lack of regulation and enforcement is really challenging. I mean, really delighted to see the High Seas Treaty being moving forward, and there's a big call to stop a lot of industrial fishing in the high seas, in high seas marine protected areas, to achieve this international thing, which is 30 by 30% of our land and sea being properly protected by 2030. And without the high seas being part of that, it will be very hard to deliver. And so this thing of illegal and unregulated fishing activity needs to be really addressed, because there are people doing very bad things, not just for nature in the high seas, but also for people. Sort of slavery, modern day slavery, human rights issues, human rights abuses, all of those things. So this is a sort of a microcosm of the bigger sort of intersect between human rights and environmental sort of justice. So it's like the two things are really one and the same thing. If we're talking about resource depletion and fishing beyond sustainable limits, really we're talking about stealing food from the future. We're stealing we're stealing people's livelihoods. We're stealing, we're in a way, even the destruction I see is potentially stealing the oxygen from future generations, given how much oxygen the sea generates. I think every other breath comes from the sea. So ultimately, environmental activism, environmental action to restore and protect our planet is a human rights issue.
Yeah. And one thing we kind of touched on briefly was the Save The Waves Coalition, and your involvement with that. I mean, that's I don't know if you could kind of give an overview. I mean, that's sort of essentially protecting like these wave like habitats.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think I've been working with them as part of their Vision Council for over a decade, and the Vision Council is part of the World Surfing Reserve. So I would help make the decision on applications for World Surfing Reserves, and I sort of had to take a slight step to the side, although I could vote on some of the discussion around the most recent one, which is a North Devon World Surfing Reserve, which I have such a personal love for, because that area, Croydon, Woolacombe and Lynmouth and other waves around there have played a big part in my own surfing sort of life. And I've spent many happy moments riding waves at those beaches. I was going to say hours, but I'm not sure. Would it all add up into hours of being on a wave? I'm not sure. Maybe.
Probably days, right?
Yeah. And so now I'm on the board of directors now for Save the Waves, and Nick Strong-Svetic and the team are doing a great job. And they're at an interesting stage of development and size, and some of my experience, I believe, can be really helpful in them, further delivering impact for what, I think you used the word surf ecosystems or habitats earlier. And this is really about, where waves break in the ecosystem that they break in, the what's happening under the surface, what wildlife there is around the wave, what's happening on the shoreline, what pollution's going in, what threats might exist to the integrity of that surfing ecosystem, and then how people are using it sustainably, what businesses and culture exist around it. And so all of those things, and it's a really exciting thing for people to get involved with. I mean, surfing sells beer, surfing sells clothes, surfing sells lots of different things, but it also sells environmentalism. And Save the Waves do a great job around that. We used it at SAS. Chad uses it as Surf Rider. It's a really great way to engage people with the places they love and how we use them, and how they'll be protected for everyone for the future, and particularly in this sort of age of people being conscious of sort of access and inclusivity. I like the fact that it gives a frame to go like, how can we make these areas more accessible to everyone? From the sort of socio-economic sort of deprived backgrounds, from different communities and cultures that may not normally be feel welcomed into that area, feel part of that community. And I like to see that, and you're seeing that with Save the Waves and some of this surfing reserves approaches. And you also see it in other parts of the evolving surfing community. Nick Hounsfield and what he's doing at the Wave, and how he's supporting adaptive surfing and surfing for marginalized communities, all of those things. And I think it's important because we do as surfers sometimes forget that it is often seen as, and can be, a very exclusive and quite intimidating sport to get into, because of some of the cultural attitudes that go with it, some of the privilege that goes with it, some of the dynamics of the sport. And it's important to break those down and see it as a much more, and create a much more welcoming space, and create a much more inclusive way of involving people, not just in the sport, but in the protection of everything that makes it possible.
Yeah. And it definitely seems like that's happening. It's just sort of, it's taking a bit of time, right? And
yeah, exactly. So yeah, but that's great. I'm pleased. I'm about to head up to North Devon for the inauguration event. I'm heading up either later today or tomorrow morning for the inauguration event, which should be fun. So yeah,
it'll be good.
All good. Yeah.
Nice. And if like everyone listening and watching, if they want to get involved with what you guys are up to with Oceana, I mean, what's the best way?
Well, look, I mean, we've got lots that's coming up that we're going to be launching. People will be able to engage more with us on social media soon. We're just sort of finalising some of our plans and strategy around that. But come to the main Oceana UK webpage, and you can see what we have been doing around MPAs and oil and gas. Download our reports, and we're going to have ways for you to get really involved in citizen activism and lobbying coming up over the next sort of 12 months. So watch this space, and always tune into my channels on, Hugo. I'm still Hugo SAS and always will be on Twitter, and on my LinkedIn channel, and you'll always find out the latest. And lots to come. The swan's legs are whirring under the surface at the moment, and will soon be taking off, and you'll see lots more.
Awesome. Well, Hugo, thanks for coming on the show, man. It's been
no problem.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome hearing from you, and kind of all the amazing work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
Over the years at SAS, and now looking forward to seeing what you're going to be doing with Oceana as well, and with all the campaigns that are coming up.
Great. Well, I hope you can come down surfing soon.
I'll try, man.
Good.